Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Greg with ASUS ROG, and we are live on Amazon. So thank you very much for watching. And in this live stream, we're going to be talking all about X570 and third generation Ryzen. Now, to help me with this, I've got Aaron here from AMD and JJ here from ASUS. And these guys are the experts. They're going to be telling you all the technical stuff, and I'll try to ask them questions about everything. And if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. But first, why don't we just get started with talking a little bit about Ryzen third generation. So what's kind of new with this, and what are the kind of the features and benefits?
Yeah. So this year we launched the first 7nm desktop processor with third gen AMD Ryzen. We launched it this summer, and we have a new part coming with this, also coming up in November. But like I said, this is our first 7nm processor, and what that means is on our AM4 platform, we can get you more cores, more threads, all on a cooler, quieter PC. In addition, we have some great technology like Precision Boost 2, which will automatically boost your processor frequency to get that better performance. If you want to take that a step further, we then have Precision Boost Overdrive with automatic overclocking, one-click overclocking for users. It's all in our Ryzen Master that you can use that. In addition, we have Game Cache, which we doubled our L3 cache on our on-chip memory processor. So now with our processor, you can have up to 72 megabytes on-chip of cache there. And then the great thing with all this is, with these motherboards, is that we are the first and only processor platform that has PCIe Gen 4. Right. So we've doubled the bandwidth up to 32 gigabytes per second, and only AMD and X570 can bring that. And then kind of wrap that all up, we still support StoreMI, so you can combine this, the storage of your hard drive at the speed of your SSD, combine them together to really make an overall great, strong platform.
Awesome. Well, that's kind of exactly what we wanted to hear. It's like, what's great about these, and all of those features. I mean, we tried to take advantage of them with the new X570 motherboard. So, so JJ, why don't you get us started? And what's kind of some of the similar features between the whole? We've got the whole family here that we're showing off, just about, of X570. What's some of the similar features between them? Yeah, so we've got a lot of different boards here, and I think even before kind of actually jumping in a little bit of those boards, you know, to actually speak to some of the things that you noted on. You know, not to undercut a lot of what you talked about there, but you know, there's a lot of really impressive stuff in terms of what AMD's done with this third generation Ryzen series processor, and a lot of what we're going to talk about on the ASUS side of the fence, especially within our motherboard philosophy, our design implementation, really mirrors, I think, a lot of the improvements that you guys brought to the table. You talked about an upcoming processor, but the fact alone right now that X570 and third gen Ryzen scales from 6 cores to 16, right? Yes. That's a huge amount of range that you have in terms of performance available to you, right? So from, you know, everyday kind of gamers, you know, and general users to, of course, the most professional and advanced kind of users that really need the most performance possible, you have a CPU that can scale across that, and you have a platform that's really been designed for that. That makes our actually job as a motherboard manufacturer a little bit more challenging, because we really need to be able to design a platform that can assure reliability and stability and performance for all of those parts, while also making sure that, you know, whichever one you drop in, you're going to get a great experience from. Yeah. Now, for people at home watching who may not be that technically inclined, now what would be the main difference between like a 6-core processor and a 16? What kind of stuff are you going to be doing with one that you wouldn't do with the other, right?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah, so with our 6-core processors, we really see that for our core gamers. That is the gamer's choice of processor, to be our Ryzen 5 lineup from there. And then Ryzen 7, you're getting into those users who want to game and stream at the same time, need a little more of that multi-threaded power from there. And with our Ryzen 9 3900X, that's our 12-core processor. Right. And with that, you can do your gaming and streaming, you can do more of your multitasking, or if you're a content creator, we have great encoding on video, great 3D rendering as well. So we really run the gamut, whether you're just whether you're just that gamer or you're using it for gaming and everything else. Right. Ryzen has you supported there.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so you really kind of cover all those different types of user bases. And also, I think another thing that you didn't know, but I think is really impressive, especially compared to the first 2 generations of Ryzen, is the improved memory controller performance, right? So there was a lot of work that your engineering team really brought to the table at extending that performance benefit of giving you higher frequencies. So higher frequencies, like in most things, gives you more performance, right? And so the really great thing is on X570, we see much higher frequencies can be reached. And we'll talk about some cool designs that we have that even kind of supplement those improvements to really be able to take things kind of further. And so I think when we talk about ASUS board design, first and foremost, if you're not aware, we now have 5 different series of motherboards that we've kind of designed for all segments of users. We have our Prime series, which is kind of our foundational series, really kind of the stalwart series from ASUS. I call it kind of the jack of all trades, but instead of being a master of none, it's almost a master of all. Regardless of what you want to do with this board, it's going to really be a great foundation.
It would make a great workstation. It would make a great gaming PC, and it's got the great looks, you know, so you can put it on show with a big, you know, custom PC with a glass panel.
And it carries that really nice, you know, distinctive white aesthetic, which also kind of differentiates it from a lot of the other boards in our lineup. But you know, this is a really strong processor to pair. Again, you could run any Ryzen processor you want on here, but you know, I think pairs really well with like a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7 based part. Then you know, when we go into the gaming side of the fence, we have really 3 series now that we offer, where we have our Tough Gaming series. This is the newest series of motherboards that we offer, a little bit more aggressive price point, but still very good quality, reliability, and a gamer-centric design with gamer-centric features that we'll talk a little bit more about here in a little bit. And then we have 2 gaming models, where one of them, actually 2 of our demo builds that we'll talk about a little bit later, examples of what we're doing on X570 gaming builds, is we have our Strix series, and then we have our formal ROG series. So these are our boards that are kind of really been built for those gamers and for, I'd say, the most demanding enthusiasts and gamers, right? So users that are looking for the absolute best, or users that are looking for kind of that sweet spot and just an awesome gaming build, are going to be taken care of from those 2 series. And then definitely not to be forgotten is going to be, I think, the WS series. You know, it's part of our portfolio, but also is a really great candidate at, maybe you're not gaming at all. Maybe you're somebody out there that's just a professional. You're maybe science and simulation, advanced productivity, or again, content creation. These boards, we've designed them aesthetically and of course feature-wise to really complement those users.
Like if you're going to build like a Ryzen 9 workstation, this would be a great system, and it looks super clean. So if you want a super clean aesthetic, it's a great board for that as well.
Exactly. So you know, if you're somebody that, you know, in that AutoCAD part of the world, you know, Adobe Creative Cloud, you know, DaVinci, you know, Blender, 3D Studio Max, like this is a really, really great kind of platform. So you know, now that we've kind of covered these series, when we talk about motherboard design, there's a lot of different aspects to consider and evaluate. You know, sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, a little bit challenging. You know, everything from, you know, the core specifications of the chipset, power delivery, connectivity, storage. You know, a lot of these different things. You know, what really kind of differentiates one board to another board, and where are kind of strengths between one, you know, manufacturer and another. And so for us, I think the most important part is that regardless of which X75 board you're going to get, you can feel confident in terms of its quality, its reliability, and its performance. So regardless of which board you're going to get, you can drop in a Ryzen part in here and you're going to get a great experience. But there is definitely going to be some key differences in terms of what we've designed to really maximize X570's performance. So I think the first thing is going to be our power delivery design. You know, historically, we've really kind of prided ourselves on this, and we've led the industry in power delivery. It's important because that's the power that you need for the CPU. And while AMD, you guys have done a fantastic job of giving you a great deal of efficiency with the 7-nanometer process, right? Allows you to really maximize having so many cores.
It does,
and at those frequencies that you guys are also able to reach, we still need to be able to scale the power to be able to go from, like I said, 6 cores all the way up to 16, right? And so for this generation, what we really did is we tailored the actual power solution to be in alignment with that really high demand. So essentially, being able to cover so many cores, we need a power delivery solution that can really ramp up to that essentially that immediate power requirement, and also be thermally efficient, so that we're not producing gobs and gobs of heat around this area, right? And ultimately also be very responsive. So latency is a factor. Actually, these components that you put on here, the more of them that you kind of have on here and the more sections you have on here, when they're all kind of ratcheting up to be able to provide you performance, if you have multiple stages of them, they can actually delay kind of responsiveness. And so for really, really great performance, we wanted to try to mitigate that. So what did we do? We actually implemented something called power stages. So traditionally on a motherboard, this power section that you're going to have here has 2 parts. So if we were to pull off the heatsink, you would see something that's called a MOSFET and a driver. This is how motherboards have been using power delivery for like 20 years, right? We decided to
I'm going to point that out there so just so everyone can see. So right there, that's where the power delivery comes from, right? For the CPU.
And this section right here, this is usually what's referred to as your VRM, or your voltage regulation module. So that's the power for the actual CPU that would get installed onto the motherboard. And so underneath this heatsink, which helps to cool that area, we put in what are called power stages. So these combine together the MOSFET and the driver together. So they actually provide a much higher level of power. They're more thermally efficient. Overall, they're pretty much just a big upgrade. And so normally you would see this on like our really high-end boards, so something, let's say like an ROG series motherboard. So these are like our flagship series motherboards that we would feature that on. The great thing is all our X570 series motherboards, even down to, let's say, like our entry series, series with
right.
the Tough Gaming feature these power stage solutions.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example of how the technology that we develop for the really high-end boards kind of trickles down and all the way down into our tough boards. So it's really cool. The high-end boards always kind of new stuff comes out on that first, and then within a year or two, couple years, you're going to get it on the more entry-level boards.
Yeah, and so that's a really great thing. And I think the consistency, though, of having that type of power solution, we're actually the only vendor on the market that has that type of solution unilaterally across all our motherboards. In addition to that, the actually heat sinks play a part to this. So even though we put those good quality power stages on there, you still need to be able to effectively dissipate the heat. So a lot of our boards on the ATX side, you're going to see them all, they feature what's called a dual contact design. So these heat sinks, they actually make contact with two parts of the VRM. One part which is called the inductor or the choke, and then the other part which is that power stage which is underneath there. So the benefit with that is that we actually have two different points of thermal contact for better dissipation, as opposed to in most motherboards you're only going to have one point of contact with just that, let's say, power stage or that MOSFET and driver. So here we get more effective thermals, and that's really important, again, at maximizing the performance, especially under heavy load. Like if you're really loading up 12 or 16 cores, you want to be able to manage that and ensure really great long-term stability and reliability.
Yeah, and I've seen on some of the small form factor boards even have like the active cooling. They've got fans built in right above that VRM to help circulate the air. And I'm not sure, is it on the ROG board as well?
So no, not on the ROG board. But speaking actually of active cooling, and we can just show an example here with one of the boards that we'll talk about a little later on our small form factor side, is that one of the really great things that you guys did when you talked about PCI Gen 4 support is, the chipset on here can produce a little bit of heat when it's under load. And so again, to be able to ensure really great long-term reliability, all our boards are featuring active cooling for the actual chipset. So even when you're using that PCI Express Gen 4 M.2 based SSD, you can really ensure great stability and reliability. And so you can see actually, even on this mini-ITX board, we have cooling not only for that VRM, but also for that chipset. Just like on all of these boards, they all feature active cooling for that chipset. And even kind of, again, speaking to ASUS quality, these are things that we try to carefully evaluate. A lot of people sometimes have concerns in fans, and saying like the reliability or the quality of it. We partnered with a company called Delta, really respected industry leader kind of in fan design, to put in a really specialized fan. It's called a Superflow bearing design. It's actually self-sealed, self-lubricates. It's rated for 60,000 hours of operation. And,
yeah, I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people are a little nervous about, because in the old days, like having those little tiny fans on your motherboard, they weren't as reliable. So for these, we really took the reliability just to the next level, just to make sure there's no worries. It's going to outlast everything else in your system. Yeah,
it's going to be extremely reliable and also very quiet. We've actually tuned the fan curve to generally be consistently under 25 dB. So in most situations,
like whisper quiet.
You're pretty much not going to even hear it. So that kind of speaks to the kind of that power delivery design. And kind of one little last point there on that little power delivery design is even something like the power connection that's on the motherboard. These boards feature what we call our ProCool power connection. It's actually something that we originally designed for our high-end workstation series of motherboards, because they were the first kind of motherboards that had a huge amount of power because they had really high-end processor support. But we actually thickened the gauge of the internal wiring in there. And the reason why would we thicken the internal gauge? Because it's resistance. That thicker that gauge gives you essentially better conduction performance, so we can lower the temperature for essentially the connection point. Which helps, of course, in terms of thermals. And it also improves the efficiency. So
and also I remember
what you're getting in gets bumped up.
Yeah. And I remember we talked about this earlier, but just the topography of the power delivery, the design. It's almost like, if you play city skylines, right? You got to make sure the traffic is all flowing nicely, and that's what we do with this. We don't just throw on a bunch of components like wherever they fit. We think of it. We think ahead and where it's going to be most efficient. Right?
Yeah. There's a lot of kind of specialized design to maximize a lot of the architecture and improvements that have really been made in to realize the best performance. This especially goes into things like the memory layout. We spoke to how Ryzen features much higher performance for DDR4, and that you can reach 3,000, 3,200, 3,400, 3,600 megahertz frequencies, and our boards can easily support those speeds and even higher speeds because of a lot of the specialized kind of trace layout that we've done here to complement that. But outside of hardware design, staying within the kind of the aspect of kind of performance and cooling in the VRM, something that we can't see on these boards, and that's actually our firmware. It's our UEFI. We again really lead the industry in offering a rich UEFI that gives you a lot of options in terms of how you kind of want to tweak into your system. Now, again, I think one of the great things right now with Ryzen is the fact you can drop in any one of these parts and you're going to get a great out-of-box experience. You don't have to worry about kind of going in and tune anything.
Right,
You
like
can
with
really
the features
just
you were talking about earlier, it's automatically going to be optimized and give you the most speed that it can handle based on temperature, right?
Correct, yeah, with the Precision Boost too, it'll look at what the kind of the headroom is and, you know, bump up your frequencies based upon that.
Yeah, and even maximizing that if you kind of bump up your cooler, you can get a little bit better performance. Like you guys get great performance already with something like, you know, the Wraith cooler, which is the box cooling solution. But if you jumped up to like an AIO cooler, you might be able to extend that precision overboost a little bit more because it realizes that, hey, I'm running a little bit cooler, and that's your guys' integrated, you know, semi technology where you can bump up that performance.
We should talk a little bit about that cooler because it does come with the 3rd generation Ryzen CPUs, and it has some really cool features, right?
Yeah, so this is our AMD Wraith Prism cool box cooler we have. This comes in our Ryzen 9 3900Xs as well as our Ryzen 7 processors. So this is your stock cooler, which we are very proud of. This is no longer just a junk cooler that you throw away. We have RGB integration in with this as well, and it sounds like, you know, ASUS has some cool things up their sleeve to make this even easier to control your RGBs, because we all know RGBs make you game faster.
Exactly.
Of course, yeah, makes you game faster and makes your system look cooler, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The great thing too about this cooler is also that it's what I would call mechanically config-free. So if you're looking for the most turnkey experience in terms of installation, it's literally just a latch that you pop in, locks into place.
It just snaps onto the mounting points that are built onto the board right away,
And it leaves kind of the rest of the area unobstructed, so that if you go ahead and pop in your cooler right here, you don't have to kind of worry about managing all this other stuff that, like, where's the cable going to route here, where's this going to go here. So the really great thing that I love is that you could just kind of pop that in there, you have something that looks cool, it's going to efficiently cool your system, and you're going to get a great experience. And that's a really nice thing to be able to offer, like I said, without having to necessarily make the investment to jump up. But you know, going back to what I was talking about there with the firmware and the UEFIs, that's really at the heart of ensuring that the hardware complements the CPU and kind of everything bridging together, because we have to work with AMD. We get updates from AMD, like there's a big performance update that AMD just released to even be able to further improve the already impressive performance of Ryzen, and just got better. And we have to patch that into our UEFI BIOS. But there's a lot of rich options. Maybe you want to tweak and tune your fans. Maybe you want to be able to go ahead and easily adjust your memory speeds. Maybe you want to adjust your boot orders. Maybe you want to easily RAID your PCIe Gen 4 M.2 SSDs. Right? All these options, along with compatibility, stability, and performance, are all built into the firmware. And while it's something that you can't kind of measure in terms of a spec, like how many USB ports there might be, or whether the board has Wi-Fi or the power solution.
Which is a great user experience, right? It's a great user experience to have that. I mean, if you like to adjust things, all your settings in the BIOS, you can do that. But then we also have software. We can do it right from the desktop. So you can adjust your fan profiles and adjust a lot of settings just without having to go into the BIOS.
For sure. So I think one of the last things is, you know, speaking to memory, you know, we talked a little bit about memory speeds. I know that you were telling me, what's the kind of recommended paired speed? Yeah,
so with our 3rd gen Ryzen processor, we find that real sweet spot, the kind of price performance when it comes to memory is it's about a 3600 CL16 around there.
Yeah, so that's a speed that any one of these motherboards support. But the really cool thing is that on our higher end boards, like let's say our ROG, our Crosshair 8 Hero board, or also the Impact board, the mini-ITX board, they feature an exclusive technology that we've implemented called OptiMem. And so what this actually allows us to do is through a specialized combination of firmware and then what we call our topology, our trace design, so actually how we're laying out the signaling between the memory slots and the actual CPU socket, we can optimize that signaling to be able to allow you to run, let's say, a 3600 kit of memory, but we can even tighten those timings even a little bit more. So you can even get better efficiency. So instead of CL16, maybe you can get CL15, CL14. Or you can go ahead and drop the voltage that's required to run at a higher speed. So all the way around, whether you're talking about kind of really pushing the performance on the CPU side, pushing the performance on the memory side, we put in a lot of hardware design to really make sure that you get the best performance, the best stability, best reliability across those series of boards. Now, with the boards that we've talked about, we also want to highlight the fact you guys are checking us out on Amazon here. We do have some bundles that we've paired together to be able to really give you guys an easy experience that if you want to be able to put together a great gaming system, you can do that with ASUS and with AMD. So our first bundle is going to be with the Tough Gaming. So we've got the Tough Gaming X570 Plus. This is going to be paired with that 3600X. Really, really solid combination. I think for a vast majority of gamers, like you said, real sweet spot. Yeah,
that'd be a great first gaming PC for someone, or if someone's going off to college, they need the first PC.
Yes.
I mean, you're going to get high performance. You're going to be able to game on it and do pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be super expensive. It's not going to like totally break the bank.
Yeah, definitely. On the board side cost, our Tough Gaming is going to be the lowest price kind of gaming board that we offer in terms of our lineup, and then from there we'll scale upwards. Kind of going to that next step up, we do go to our Strix series. So
which this one here on the end.
Exactly. So our Strix is going to be our X570-E gaming. That's going to be another fantastic solution that we have there, and also is paired with 3600X. So that's going to bump you up to a little bit more connectivity, a little bit more beefy VRM. You're going to get a little bit more advanced software for audio networking. You know, some nicer kind of plus points on that board. You know, that's also going to come included with Wi-Fi 6. So you're going to have that latest generation of wireless technology. And we'll talk a little bit more about the really cool stuff in terms of Wi-Fi and networking and audio when we get into some of the other aspects of board design. But
well, I really like the Strix boards. I mean, for those guys at home, this system here is built using this Strix motherboard. So it kind of shows you the potential. We'll go into these systems a little later in the stream, but I just want to show you the potential you can do with this board, and they look great aesthetically, and they're kind of in between, I would say, the Tough and the ROG as far as like cost and performance, I guess.
No,
so it's a great all-around gaming motherboard.
Feature set wise, it's really, really strong. So you feel like you pretty much get kind of, I'd say, clearly beyond, I'd say, an entry-level build. You get in true enthusiast class kind of connectivity and features, but you don't go into, let's say, more of some of the niche type of specialized offering designs that we have on our formal RG series, which are fantastic, but they might be more targeted to a very specific type of enthusiast user. So maybe like custom water cooling, where that user, hey, I'm not doing custom water cooling, so I don't necessarily need some of those options on the formal RG board. I would be great with the Strix board. Yeah,
and some of the custom water cooling features would be just have built-in headers that you can plug in water temperature sensors and pump speeds. So it has built-in monitoring for a custom loop. You can plug it all in.
Yeah, it streamlines and actually even saves you money because you don't actually have to buy that type of hardware.
Right.
The two other bundles that we'll also have, and we'll touch on these a little bit later, but we have, if you're moving into the higher bracket and you're really interested in kind of going to that higher core count, you can jump into going with the Crosshair 8 Hero, and you can get a 3800X, or you could even go even a bit higher and go to the 3900X. So really, really awesome combinations right there.
So the 3900X, how many cores does that have?
So the 3900X has 12 cores, 24 threads. So you're going to be able to do seamless gaming, content creation, multitasking, anything you throw at this processor will be able to handle.
Awesome. So it's going to be the high end. I mean, you could do, that has almost as many cores as the system we're using to stream this. We've got a Threadripper system over there that we're using to process all this video production. So 12 cores is more than you need for
and I'm pretty sure he's gaming as well while on here.
And again, that kind of reinforces the point that I think AMD is in a really awesome position with the X570 chipset and with a Ryzen to be able to scale, like we talked about, from literally 6 cores, eventually to when the 3950X comes out, 16. So it's a huge amount of scaling and performance. So I think from there, now the next thing kind of move into, now that we've talked about some of the series, some of the kind of design points here in terms of what we're doing with the VRM, the cooling, the memory, and the UEFI, is getting a little bit more into gaming. So when we talk about gaming, we have 3 different series like we talked about, where we have the Tough Gaming, we have the ROG Strix, and then we have our highest in series with ROG series motherboards. But sometimes I think for users that are out there that are looking to put together a system, it can be a little bit challenging to understand what makes kind of like an ROG or an ASUS gaming motherboard different, right, than let's say other motherboards that are on the market, and even maybe compared to like a great board like our Prime series or our WS series, where some of the base specifications might feel very similar, right? Like I know, hey, that's got this networking, it has USB 3.1, PCIe Gen 4, it has DDR4 support, even has RGB connectivity. So where are some of these differences? The first one I think we can touch on is going to be networking. And then we'll talk a bit about audio. And there's definitely software that bridges together both of these items. So on the networking side, the big thing that you're going to see is going to be, one, that we're going to give you very good quality network integrated network controllers with 1 gigabit Intel network controllers, and then we're going to give you Wi-Fi 6 on the ROG series motherboards. So for Wi-Fi 6,
I think all of these have Wi-Fi, correct?
Most of the boards have Wi-Fi. The WS does not have Wi-Fi.
This one just
but you could easily add Wi-Fi 6. We do actually have Wi-Fi 6 add-in cards, so if you do want to drop that in there.
Well, this one has more like the really high-speed LAN cards,
correct,
right?
and it actually has 2 integrated NICs for content creation professional, kind of like if you want to have a SAN and NAS kind of configuration or internet or local based kind of network connections.
Right.
But with Wi-Fi 6, the big thing is like people wonder, well, where's my kind of clear benefit? And so if we take a look at kind of previous generation 811 AC Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi 5, I would say in the real world, so with a good quality, ASUS Wi-Fi router, you're probably getting somewhere between about 350 to about 400 megabits. So that's about 4 times the speed of a 10100 Ethernet cable. That's quite nice. Already very good performance. With Wi-Fi 6, if you pair that with an AX-based router, you could realistically see in the real world between 800 to almost a gigabit in terms of the speed.
We actually have an AX router here that we can show off. This is the Rapture GT AX 11000. So this is a good example of kind of just the flagship.
That would be the absolute best.
This is the absolute best wireless situation you could have in your home, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's got eight antennas.
Yeah, if you were to pair that with one of these Wi-Fi 6 enabled boards, and like I said, if you had this like in your gaming room or you had this in your setup at home, like I said, even with Wi-Fi in play in the real world, you could legitimately see 800 megabits plus a speed, which is crazy to think. Like I said, 8 times the speed of a 10100 Ethernet cable, ultra low latency, ultra high speed throughput, and really be able to offer you that best-in-class wireless experience. The other cool thing too, though, is that it's not just about the physical Wi-Fi that we build on board. The speeds are great, but there's also kind of an additional layer that we add in with software. So we have something that we've now had for 5 generations and we continue to refine, and that's called our Game First Packet Priority software. And so this is software that actually works with either the Wi-Fi controller or the physical network controller. And so the first cool part of it is that there's actually something that's called ROG First synchronization technology. So actually, if you were to pair this with something, let's say like the Rapture series of routers, the actual router will automatically prioritize this device as the most important gaming device automatically. So you just go into the software, you click on, and then it will automatically speak to the router and says, hey, I'm gaming. I want to be seen as the most important device, which, in my household right now, I average maybe about 30 wireless devices, which some people think, oh, well, that's a lot. But if you start to count, you've got Wi-Fi cameras, you got your thermostat, you've got your laptops, you got your phones, you got desktops, you got TVs, you got smart speakers.
I'm trying to think. I probably have like 8.
maybe
you
10. Probably have more than that.
I'm going to go home and count, because if you have 30, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely have more than me, but I don't know. I got the tablet, phone. Okay, I'll count it up when I get home.
We'll let the count. But that's the really cool part, is that here it just simplifies that experience for the gamers. That they can just essentially prioritize that, and that's an ROG exclusive design feature. But if you want the flexibility, also go in and kind of tailor your networking experience, you can do that. So that's really, really nice, because let's say I'm playing, Apex Legends or Fortnite or Grand Theft Auto, or I'm jumping online, into any type of online game. I can now go ahead and open up Game First, and I can set that application or that game to be the most important. So even if, let's say, I was streaming music and my desktop application, or I was watching videos, or I was doing some browsing on Amazon, or opening an email, none of those other applications or instances are going to affect my primary gaming experience, because I've set this to a priority. And we actually even have built-in logic now that will do it automatically for you. So if you don't even want to go in and do this, the moment that you open that game, we realize,
hey, he's gaming. Let's not interrupt this experience for him.
And let's prioritize that. And so that's really, really great. And we can track all kinds of other information for you there if you want to be aware of that, or if you've got a lot of Wi-Fi in your house and you want to make sure that you're on the right channel so that you're not getting stability or inconsistencies. We even have built-in wireless monitoring, so we can show you which might be the right channel that you might want to use as a gamer. So a lot of really nice options that are built into that Game First software that you're not going to have that type of rich gamer-centric software on, let's say, like our Prime series. You're still going to be able to have great, of course, connectivity, but you're not going to have those kind of more centralized functions that are really built in to give you a turnkey experience for really the most streamlined gaming online experience, right? Now, moving from the networking side is audio. Now, for me, I'm really passionate about audio. I'm, music, movies, games, it doesn't matter. You want to have a great audio experience, and something that we're really proud about on on our motherboards. And actually, I can use that board, but I can also use this Prime Series board. You might not be able to see it too much, but it's pretty cool.
This features on most of our gaming boards, right?
Correct.
Pretty much all of them.
On every single one of these boards,
all of these X570 boards.
They all feature this isolated audio design. And for our gaming board specifically, we do have a specialized design that I'll touch on here in a moment. But the cool thing is that there's this isolation audio path. And we were actually the first vendor to ever implement this on a motherboard, is this isolated audio design. And our goal in terms of creating this isolated audio design is that we wanted to move away the audio components from the rest of the board, so that
just so there's no interference from any other power.
Exactly.
Anything.
You just had that noisy environment. We realized that the audio codec, so the chip that produces the audio, could perform much better if we separated it away from this noisier environment. And so that's why we created this kind of isolation moat, this little moat that kind of gated away and kept it in its own little area and said, hey, you can perform now to the best of your abilities. And so if we take a look at like one of our gaming boards, even in the small form factor, we've done this. We actually have it on a fully discrete, isolated card. It's not even on the motherboard. It's in its own little isolated sound card where it has really high audio grade capacitors for improved tonality. It has an operational amplifier that's built in there. It even has something that's called depup filtering, where if any of you have ever had speakers, and I don't know, Aaron, if you've ever experienced this.
If you're in chat in a game or something.
And you restart your computer, you ever heard that pop that you get? And that's actually handled. We have mitigating technology that we built in here so that you don't actually get that pop back. So a lot of little things that are built in to really give you that better quality experience. And our higher end ROG series boards, they feature Supreme Effects, which is the same thing that we offer on, let's say, like our Strix. But on the ROG series, they're going to feature Supreme Effects and also include an ESS Saber DAC. And so there's a lot of discussion sometimes around DACs, usually for people that are kind of a little bit more into audio. They've got nicer headphones or maybe really nice speakers. It just helps to improve tonality, open up soundstage, give you better detailing. And so that's kind of one of those premium touches that ROG was really the first to put in an ESS Saber DAC in there and really focus on elevating kind of that sound quality level, that if you want that better experience, you want more immersion, you want more detail, then you have that. But it doesn't just end there. The cool thing is that we have a whole software suite that complements that hardware design.
So you can go in and customize the settings so you get the listening experience that you want, whether you're gaming or watching movies, or if you're doing Skype conversations or whatever. You can just optimize it for whatever, and
it's not just as basic as, like, let's say an EQ, right? I think a lot of times, we think like, oh, it's just an EQ. Am I going to really use that? We've looked at a lot of different aspects. So again, if we go back to gaming, because we're talking about making gaming boards and how they're different from, let's say, traditional boards, we have Sonic Studio, and then we have special what we call post-processing filtering. And so we can actually apply ambient and noise canceling post-processing. So let's say maybe like in my old apartment before I moved into my house, when I would game, I would be gaming right next to the kitchen. And my fiance, she would be making, food, and then all of a sudden you'd hear kind of the noise or rattle or different kind of sounds that were going on, and that you would be hearing that come through the chat, but now, essentially, with this type of technology, you can turn on that post-processing, and it filters a lot of that ambient noise out, and so what people hear is my voice. And the nice thing is you can do this also on the other end. Maybe you got somebody that's coming in with a little bit of a hotter mic, a little bit more distortion, a little bit more buzzy. You can also apply that post-processing and clean up their audio so that you get more clean, distinctive audio that's more intelligible. So it just improves that overall experience. And a lot of other nice little subtle things where we have profiling that's built in for specific type of games like action RPGs or MOBAs or first-person shooters. We have our cheat technology that some people like to call it with our essentially
Sonic Radar? Sonic Radar, and it'll tell you where the sounds are coming from, so you can use that.
Well, it visualizes.
Visualizes. You have a little map even. So
exactly on screen in real time.
So that's fun. Might not want to use that in any official competition, but it's fun when you're at home.
But if you got a match against a friend, and you got a brand new ROG board, and you want to maybe take an extra, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But another cool kind of, again, pioneering feature that, again, on an ROG board, we're just giving you this much more in terms of saying, hey, this is just another way to be able to offer another way that you can improve the experience of your game.
And I think people understand too, with audio is very demanding of processors as well. So the higher core count, the higher thread count you have, the better quality audio experience you'll have. Whether you're jumping into PUBG with multiple players on a map, you're still going to get that crisp audio process there.
Yeah, you actually make a really great point to that, because in PUBG, take for instance, they use HTRF tracking, which is a really advanced form of real-time spatial sound, but it can be really computational intensive. So normally in that type of game, especially when you got so many people on the map, you wouldn't want to put those type of high-end audio sounds essentially enabled in your settings.
So that could lower your frame rate potentially?
Oh, 100%. It actually could significantly lower your frame rate.
So I learned something new today. So the audio settings, I don't play PUBG, sorry guys.
Well, it depends on the game engine, but I think that's the really great thing that you have with this Ryzen architecture, is that if games that are pushing the envelope in specialized, let's say audio, or there's other games too where you have like Total War is a great example of this. They have a really advanced AI computation engine because there's so many units on screen that it scales actually with Ryzen. So if you put in a faster and higher core count CPU, you can actually get better performance because it goes, hey, I got more cores to give you more instances of these characters on screen.
So more cores will just give you a better gaming experience overall.
Higher frame rate. So if you want to be able to jump in and let's say use like a FreeSync monitor that we've got at 144 hertz or 240 hertz, you can combine that with the CPU, with the board, with the graphics card to be able to give you that great gaming experience.
Right.
And I think the last part, you know, in terms of, before we kind of touch on some of these builds right here, you know, we talked about the audio, we talked about the networking, but then there's also still a little bit more. There's always kind of this little extra, I'd say, secret sauce that we sprinkle in with a lot of value-add software that we put in our ROG boards that also differentiates it. So getting back to when we talked about memory, one of the really cool things that we've done specifically for ROG boards is they come with RAM cache and RAM disk software.
So that's right.
This is pretty cool. So I know you were asking me about kind of how this works.
I was also asking, like, what's the maximum memory you can put in these boards? And all these 5 up here, it's 128 gigs, right?
Correct.
So that's plenty of space for RAM cache or even RAM disk. And then the small form factor boards, if you use the dual capacity memory, you can get up to 64 gigs.
Yeah, and in most situations, what we find, even with, I'd say, kind of more enthusiast gamers and streamers, is they're usually only real-time using somewhere between about 8 to about 14 gigs of memory, right? So if you put in like 32 gigs or 64 gigs, right, you've actually got a lot of memory that's kind of sometimes just sitting there, right? And so our kind of perspective was, how can we help to maximize the value if you've made that investment in these bigger memory kits?
Right.
So
you can set up the RAM cache, you use an extra 12 to 16 gigabytes just to cache your frequently used programs. Right?
And it will help to sustain the overall lifespan and the performance of your traditional SSD, or if you're still using a hard drive, then you can do that with a hard drive as well. Where things get really interesting is doing it with a RAM disk, where you could actually create your own volume. So take, for instance, in a system that I've set up, I actually had like 8 gigabytes and I installed my browser straight to memory.
Right.
So I ran my whole browser straight from memory.
So your browser never slows down.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter how many tabs you got open.
I can have those 50 tabs and I can be pulling just straight from memory, and it's fantastic. Or, you know, for certain games, you know, if they're not super large, like, you know, CSGO, you could go ahead and install the entire game straight to just system memory. Now, keep in mind, the performance is already beyond impressive with the PCIe Gen 4, you know, M.2 based SSD, right? But DRAM is even faster, right? And especially with the performance improvements that the DDR4 memory controller has in Ryzen, you can even have faster performance. So it's amazing that if you think about it, you could do RAM cache on a PCI Express Gen 4 M.2 SSD, right? Or you could have your RAM disk, you know, running at 3600 megahertz, right? It's just a really awesome way that if you're really talking about you want to have kind of like the end-all be-all performance-oriented system, it's a pretty cool way to kind of set up your build. And that's, like I said, all included. You're not going to see that as a spec in terms of like the number of USB ports, or whether it's Wi-Fi, or whether it has this type of cooling solution or this type of VRM design, but those are value adds that you get when you buy an ROG motherboard. Right.
So you mentioned PCIe Gen 4. Maybe you were going there for the next topic, but why don't we just talk about that now? So that is, of course, the CPU that you use is very important for that, and these are kind of our first series of motherboards that use the PCIe Gen 4. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how AMD makes that possible, and you can tell us how we've integrated that into the motherboards.
Yeah, so AMD 3rd Gen Ryzen is the first and only platform that supports Gen 4, doubling of the bandwidth from the previous generation of Gen 3. And what I really love about these processors is there's virtually no bottleneck. So you have 36 usable Gen 4 lanes. And
that's across the board on all of the X570 chipset boards,
correct. Right? And these are very flexible lanes. As you can see with the multiple motherboard designs we have for X570s, this is really allowing our ASUS to, whether they want to bond or bifurcate the different lanes, to really start creating these things. Do you need more M.2 drives? Do you need more GPU slots? Do you need more SATA ports? These have flexible designs that people can gravitate towards and really customize their motherboard based on what their needs are, with the great plethora of offerings they have. And what I really love about these processors is the fact that you have Gen 4 throughout. So you have Gen 4 lanes coming off the processor. You have Gen 4 lanes coming off the chipset. And then you have the uplink between the processor and the chipset is also Gen 4. So there's no bottlenecks. Information can freely flow through the motherboard in your system.
Yeah, and I think, definitely not to undercut that statement, that is a really big deal, that across the board, when you talk about essentially all the connections that you're interfacing with, you as a user, when you go to install that graphics card, you're getting access to PCI Express 4 bandwidth, right? Assuming, of course, the graphics card supports that. Same thing with that M.2 drive, or the I.O. Some people don't realize that some of the I.O. connections you physically have on a motherboard, so, if I look at the I.O., so the connections here on the motherboard, some of these can be linked into PCI Express lanes directly. And so again, having essentially some of these connections linked in can help to maximize that performance. So AMD has really enabled a great deal of flexibility for users in terms of having that type of performance available to you. And like you noted, Greg, on all these boards we have, of course, PCI Express Gen 4 support, which right now is really going to be most commonly used, I'd say, for an M.2 based SSD, especially with drives like what we've got here in this kind of small form factor build. I think actually with that, we can actually talk again, about some examples of kind of how these boards come together. So, here on the two ends of the spectrum, we've got kind of two examples of what it would be like if you go about putting together an actual X570 gaming system. So on the first side here is going to be a small form factor, and this is a really big thing for us. A lot of people were really wanting ASUS to release a high performance mini-ITX based solution, and so we're really excited to finally be able to come to market. This X570 launch, it's our biggest AMD launch ever in terms of the amount of boards that we've put to the market. When you combine together not only our X570 solution, but also our B450 solutions, and also on the high-end side for Threadripper X399, we've just got a board for any type of AMD-enabled solution that you're looking for. But on the small form factor side specific, the X570, we have two. So we have this guy right here. This is the X570-i Gaming, and then we have the Crosshair 8 Impact. And this is a really big deal because this is the first time we've ever done an Impact board for AMD. Actually, this is the first really high-end enthusiast DTX, mini DTX-based motherboard on the market.
So it's a little bit taller, right? So this one's basically a square than that one. I can hold it. So then. So this one has an extra inch and a half on the bottom, so it's a little bit bigger, but it'll still fit in most cases, right? Because if you're going to be using, that's our high-end small form factor motherboard. So with that, you're definitely going to be wanting to use a two-slot graphics card, right?
Correct.
So the two-slot graphics card, when you pop it in there, it just goes to the bottom of the motherboard, so it doesn't extend any farther than that. So if you have a case that will fit a dual-slot motherboard like this. Strix Radeon card here.
Yeah, so this is a 5700 XT. We actually make quite a number of series of graphics cards where we have some solutions that are going to be two-slot, and then we have other cards that might be a little bit larger to even offer better thermal cooling performance. And generally what we find is that for users that are looking for the highest end performance, the mini DTX board is going to be the most kind of complementary because it's going to be unconstrained. Our goal really with that type of motherboard was to be able to say, look, you want to be able to have something that's essentially comparable to a high-end board like our Crosshair 8 Hero, but in a smaller form factor. And that's what we've accomplished here with this system, where you could pair this together with a 3800X, a 3900X, even a 3950X, and you're not going to be constrained. We've got a really, really amazing power delivery solution that's built on here, where we have super high-end power stages, microfine alloy choics, 10K rated capacitors, just really, really high-quality VRM to really be able to ensure stability, reliability, and performance with regardless of what CPU you're going to be running.
Well, one thing that's really cool about the Impact board, and you can see it in this system, did you go ahead and turn the lights on that system there? It looks like it went to sleep there.
Let's light it up.
Let's light it up. So on the inside, so you're not really, even with the small form factor, it still packs in almost everything that a regular ATX case has. Like you even have this extra additional module here. And this is, you've seen on some of our other motherboards, it's DIMM.2, but this is for M.2 drives, right? And it fits into a SODIMM rather than a standard DIMM slot like the larger boards. So you can pop this in, that you can fit two M.2s on here and take advantage of all those PCIe lanes and the Gen 4. And this just pops in. I don't know if we can do this live. Go ahead and pop that in, JJ.
Let's go ahead.
So it really just takes advantage of all the space that you have. Well, it utilizes the limited space you have in a very good way. So you still have M.2. There's still a heat sink on there. And you can see it even lights up if you look inside the system that we have.
Yeah, and here we had to get really creative because we really wanted to leverage and maximize the performance benefits and the features that X570 provided, right, but not being constrained by the smaller form factor size. So here, like Greg noted, you can have still two M.2 drives. We also want to expand on the connectivity. Most traditional mini-ITX boards, you're only going to have two fan headers. With that little optional, well, not optional, but it's essentially a modular-based item. You can have essentially up to 4 fan headers, and we still even support what's called PWM splitters. So you could actually even run more fans from those 4 headers. You have 4 RGB headers that are available to you because that card also gives you additional headers.
2 additional ones.
Where traditionally on a standard mini-ITX, you're only going to have 2 headers. So that's a great thing here in this system that we have set up, where you can see I've got the RGB lighting for the fans. For the cooler, I got LED strip in there. I've got memory. We've got that MP600 from Corsair in there. You know, we've got that nice RGB memory that's in that system. That is all synchronized through our ASUS Aura Sync by utilizing all those nice headers. So I don't have to have like a secondary controller hub, or I don't have to have any type of splitters that are set up in there. I can run everything directly from the motherboard. So it really simplifies that kind of overall experience. So you're really able to maximize the benefits. But you know, it's pretty crazy when you take a look between this board and the Dash I, because on face value they're going to look pretty similar, but the fact that, you know, it's improved power delivery, it has better audio design, right? It also is going to give you even really advanced features like on the Hero. The Hero even has specialized what is called voltage monitoring circuitry built on board. So for those enthusiasts that love to jump into like Ryzen Master, be able to check their voltages with the utmost precision, we have specialized actually circuitry that's built on the motherboard to give you the most accurate voltage monitoring that's traditionally not offered in motherboards, because you're using a different type of more traditional design it's a little bit lower. You have this nice big cavity that you can kind of just put all your cables and everything into. Just kind of makes the overall management process simple, and it's still pretty compact compared to, you know, a larger tower traditional ATX system. But when we talk about ATX, we can see on the other end of the spectrum, we've got something that this is not even a normal ATX system. This is you know, a truly specialized high-end custom water cooling build, where you can see you've got hardline tubing, beautiful base design, and it's using one of our ATX base boards with the X570 Strix-E board, and just an overall beautiful kind of representation again of just kind of the flexibility
around here, show the
of what you have available to you, and just general PC DIY in terms if you want to approach building, you know, in unique and different ways. Not everything has to look like a traditional box. You can totally go something extravagant and crazy like this, which just looks amazing.